Here is your Atlanta real estate market update. In July, the average amount of days that a home was on the market before going under contract was 26 days, and then in August, it went up to 27 days, and in September, 31 days. This continual creeping upward, now we're past 30 days, is very surprising. Besides last year, this is really not the norm at all. We haven't seen this in almost 10 years now that we have seen this in 2023 and 2024. We're right around there in August, around the 30-day mark for average days on market for a listing. And so this is clear that we are finally in a buyer's market. Anything past 2 or 3 weeks for the average time for a home to be on the market before going under contract is a pretty safe bet that it's a buyer's market. And so again, this is something that we have seen decades ago, but we're now just kind of coming back to this buyer's market. What's up, y'all? My name is Victor with Atlanta Suburban Living. We put out videos every week about what it's like to live in Atlanta and the suburbs of Atlanta. Every once in a long while, we talk about the real estate market and the numbers and kind of a bit of an analysis on how the market is doing here. Another number that I like to track is the amount of homes that are sold every month. In all of Metro Atlanta in July, there were 3,200 homes sold, and then in August, it crept down a bit to 2,800 homes sold, and then also in September, we had about 2,800 homes sold. But this is really surprising the most when we compare it to how many homes are coming on the market. And so in 2021, when it was a super strong seller's market, there was not really a whole lot of houses coming on the market, but now we're seeing a lot more homes coming on the market. So in July, there were 5,400 homes on the market, and then in August 4,800 new homes came on the market. In September we had 5,000 new homes come on the market. And so when you compare these two numbers, for example, in September 5,000 new homes came on the market, but only 2,800 homes sold. It's very obvious that there are a lot more sellers than there are buyers. And while I have kind of been talking about this being a buyer's market here in Metro Atlanta for a while now, I've kind of seen some of the comments in the comment section below talk about how it's no way it's a buyer's market. It's still crazy difficult to buy a home. And I totally agree. It is still difficult, unfortunately, to buy a home, and home prices are still stupid high, crazy expensive, but I don't mean that it's easy to buy a home. When I say that it's a buyer's market, by no means am I trying to say that it's easy to buy a home. What I'm saying is that when you compare the sellers to the buyers have the advantage over the sellers in a real estate transaction. And so when it was a seller's market and people were overpaying for homes, the sellers had the advantage in a typical real estate transaction. But today, because there are far more sellers than there are buyers, the buyers have the advantage over the sellers in a real estate transaction. And so this means that the buyers are now dictating a lot of the terms in a purchase contract. They're not having to pay over list price for a home. They're getting more time for an inspection period or more time for an appraisal contingency. And so there are lots of different factors that go into play when you're buying a home, and the buyers are dictating a lot more of these things. Another big one that we're seeing here in Metro Atlanta is that the sellers are paying for much of, if not all of, the buyer's closing costs when they're buying a home. And so again, this is not something that we have seen in a decade at least. And so it's finally kind of swinging towards the buyers in the real estate transaction. Obviously, one of the biggest factors for what determines it being a buyer's market or seller's market is the interest rates. If you plan on buying a home here in Metro Atlanta, or you have any questions about what it's like to move here, feel free to call, text, or email me anytime. Thank you so much to everybody who has reached out. I'm always happy to help, even if you just have a simple question about what it's like to live here. But interest rates are definitely going to be one of the biggest factors that determines whether or not it's a buyer's market or a seller's market. And so when interest rates were super low and it was 3% and there was a ton of buyers, there were more buyers than there were sellers. But now, because interest rates are much higher, there are not as many buyers as there are sellers. And so in July, interest rates were at about 6.75%. And then in August, they came down to about 6.5%. And in the end of September, interest rates went down to about 6.3%. In fact, right around the middle of September, they even dipped down a bit to 6.1%. And so we're seeing slowly these interest rates are kind of creeping down toward the latter half of the year. I really just think we're gonna see this bouncing between 6 and 7% for the foreseeable future. We had a Fed meeting recently and they dropped the interest rate for the basis points of the thing, and so it lowers the interest rates or something. Whatever it is that the Fed does kind of affected the mortgage interest rates a little bit. And so this is one of the reasons why we're seeing interest rates having come down in the last few months. But it also important to note here is that I have been saying for many months here, if not a year or two, we're really never going to see the 3% interest rate like anytime for the foreseeable future. This is not something that we're gonna hopefully get back to 3% interest rates. That was a response to the pandemic. That was the market trying to prevent another housing market crash like we had in 2008. And many people were kind of worried, is COVID gonna make the housing market crash? Well, let's lower the interest rates to protect the housing market. And so that 3% interest rate was a emergency response, and so it's not something that we should expect. In fact, interest rates were much closer to 5 or 6% pre-pandemic, so we're just back to the way it was pre-pandemic. And so to see these 3% interest rates or even 4%, I really don't think is something that we should wait for. If you're waiting for the interest rates to come back down to 4%, you're going to miss the boat, and home prices will continue to increase as you are waiting for interest rates to come down, and we won't see that 4% for a long time. And so something to keep in mind. I always want to keep it real with you and the facts about what it's like buying a home. I understand it's difficult for some people to pay these outrageous price tags for a home, but waiting for interest rates to come down is not the answer. And then a big number that everybody wants to know is home prices, the average sold prices for homes. Are they going up? Are they going down? So in July, in all of Metro Atlanta, the average sold price, and by average I mean the median sold price of all of the 3,200 homes sold, I literally went to the middle one and looked at the middle number for all of the home prices that were sold, and it was $435,000. So all of that to say that the median sold price in Metro Atlanta in July was $435,000, and then in August it was $425,000, and then in September we had a big jump down to $412,000. The biggest takeaway here is what happens when the school year starts, and so the public school system is one of the biggest, if not the biggest factor for the home prices here in Metro Atlanta. When the school year starts, many buyers kind of exit the housing market. Many people are trying to get moved into their new home before the school year starts. So when the school year started here in Metro Atlanta at the very beginning of August, this is when we started to see that big jump downward, which is why we had $425,000 median sold price in August and then $412,000 in September. We're gonna see this a bit more. We're also gonna take a look at Cobb County and Marietta and Alpharetta and Fayette County. Take a look at these numbers for all of those areas as well to see how the market is doing. And one of the biggest things we're gonna see is how the start of the school year has affected the market numbers for those areas. When it comes to what I'm seeing here in the market on the ground, going to see homes every weekend, almost every day, what we're typically seeing with many of the homes is that the homes that are not necessarily move-in ready, those homes tend to stay on the market for a long time. But still, the ones that are move-in ready and have done a lot of work to prepare for the listing, fresh coat of paint, maybe new flooring, staging for the home, all of these things really makes makes a home far more move-in ready and appear more desirable, those homes are still going off the market kind of quickly. Depends on where the home is, what part of Metro Atlanta it's in, but for the most part, those move-in ready homes tend to go off the market much faster than a home that needs even a little bit of work. Even the smallest amount of work that a home might need is preventing them from going off the market much faster. Let's also take a look at some of the other specific areas of Metro Atlanta. For example, Cobb County, this would be cities like Marietta or Kennesaw, Ackworth. In Cobb County, we're seeing very similar numbers. One of the biggest ones to take into consideration here is the amount of new listings. There were 942 new homes for sale in June, and then in July, 911, in August, 796, but in September, we had a big jump up to 1,046 new homes came on the market in Cobb County. This is kind of surprising. This is not typical for many of the areas of Metro Atlanta, but I think we're seeing this in Cobb County because it's a popular city, great schools, very family-friendly area, and so we're having a bit of an influx of buyers here in Cobb County, and so many of the home sellers know that. Many of the real estate agents also know this, and they are telling their seller clients, hey, now might be a good time to buy. So we're seeing a little bit of a jump upward in September, especially as interest rates are coming down. So unique for Cobb County, this increase in the number of new listings. And then here's the number for Gwinnett County. You can see average days on market in Gwinnett were 19 in July, 28 in August, 30 in September. But one of the big ones here is the number of homes sold. Very big drop from July to August. 806 homes sold in July to 607 homes in August. Again, this all has to do with the start of the school year, and so certainly a big effect for these specific areas. Gwinnett County would be areas like Lawrenceville, Suwanee, Beaufort, Duluth. These are all in Gwinnett. Another area of Metro Atlanta that's super popular is Fayette County, and so we're talking about cities like Fayetteville, Peachtree City, Tyrone. Again, we have a lot of similar numbers here. We can see the average sold price in Fayette County went from $570,000 in July to $520,000 in August, and then $525,000 in September. But the biggest surprise here is the average or the median days on market. In July, it was 24 days. In August, it was 20. But then come the start of the school year, in September, it has jumped way up to 32. Now, what does this mean for buyers, or if you're planning on moving to Fayetteville or Peachtree City from another area? What this means is that there is way less buyer competition in Fayette County than many of the other suburbs of Metro Atlanta. To go from 20 median days on market to 32 just in the span of 1 month is very significant. And so definitely less competition in Fayette County. Another area that many people are interested in is Alpharetta. And so median days on market for a listing in Alpharetta in July was 19. In August, it was 17. And then in September, it was 20. But the biggest surprise with this one is the average sold price for the homes. In July, it was $849,000. In August, it was $825,000, but come the start of the school year in September, it jumped way down to $777,000. And this is typically what we're going to see in Alpharetta until like the spring of 2026. So all of these numbers certainly very much affected by the school year, and we're going to kind of see these same similar patterns throughout the rest of the year, especially as the holiday season comes. We'll kind of see everything slow down a little bit more. Come February or March of 2026 is when we'll see everything ramp back up. More buyers on the market, home prices going back up. And so this is all very typical if you are looking for a home, if you're interested in making the move, trying to find the sweet spot right before the spring rush of 2026 is definitely going to be very beneficial. If you want more information about the best suburbs in all of Metro Atlanta, check out this video. I'll see you in the next one.